Hey, greetings. Welcome to the Brain Gauge channel. I'm Mark Tamerdal, and I read a little news article yesterday on CNN Health, and just wanted to share that with you. Okay, it was a pretty good article, a pretty interesting article. They were reporting on a study that was published recently, and it was about cognitive decline being linked to ultra-processed foods. Let's see, what was that study? And the study was posted by Sandy Lamont of CNN yesterday on August 1st, and is titled Cognitive Decline Linked to Ultra Processed Food. And it cited the study that tracked 10,000 Brazilians over 10 years. It's a huge study. There's a lot of people and that they tracked and looked at their diet and found that the diet of, or sort of the cutoff, was more than 20% processed food was linked with cognitive decline. In other words, and the way they were comparing it, they were saying, okay, for 10 years or a 10-year period, they looked at the cognitive decline in each individual. And if they had more than 20% processed food, they had roughly about a 25% increase in cognitive decline over the cognitive decline that was found in people who ate less than 20% processed food. And if you wonder what 20% is, just do the math. So 20% of 2,000 calories, if that's what you eat in a day, is about 400. And, check out the calorie chart at McDonald's next time you're there. And really astounding statistics, they go with this, and something like 58% of the calories processed by Americans are from ultra processed foods. Kudos Canadians, because they're only 48%. But, that's kind of interesting because, where that's a lot of processed food that we eat. And, it's obviously it's not good for your brain. But what could you do about it? So one thing you can do is try to cut out processed foods and see if that actually tracks if your brain scores get better. So let's take one case study and look at this one case study that using the brain gauge. This was submitted by an individual using the brain gauge years ago. The brain gauge user removed gluten from their diet, and they started their diet here, and you can see that right after they started their diet, or right before they started their diet, these were what their scores look like. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the brain gauge scoring system, red is bad, green is good, and you see these numbers are written here, and the higher the number, the better. The overall score is the cumulative score from calculated from all these other scores. And the overall score is what's plotted here. And again, 0 is the worst score, 100 is the best. And so after they started their diet, it took a while, but after a couple of weeks, their scores started to improve. So basically, sometimes it has a long-term effect. And what does gluten have to do with processed food? Well, a lot of processed foods have gluten. So when you cut gluten out, you do cut out a lot of processed food. There are a lot of things that are gluten-free that are processed now. I've been gluten-free myself almost 25 years. And believe me, it was not that easy. First, 25 years ago, when you went gluten-free, there weren't a lot of processed foods. And so, basically you realize, oh, you're cutting out a lot of processed foods. So processed foods, what do they have in them that's so bad for them? That's one question you want to ask. And it's really, there's a whole long list of things that go into them. But you can start at the beginning. Herbicides and pesticides are used for the crops that are made for, that actually go into those processed foods, whether it be corn or wheat or oats or whatever. Generally, they use all kinds of herbicides and pesticides and GMO products. But anyway, let's take a look at another study. If you go through the literature, there's a whole lot of studies about things that you eat, about nootropics, things that might improve your brain health, or things that you shouldn't eat, or basically supplements. But you can find these things in the literature, and let's just go through one study talking about what you could eat and what makes you have better brain function. So, and this study came out in 2015. It was the effects of eating walnuts on reaction time. It was just part of the study, but let's take a look at this. This was looking at a fairly large number of people, and it was a survey of nut eaters, and comparing them to people who didn't eat nuts in that same group. And so you have people that eat walnuts, people that eat walnuts and other nuts, and then people who eat no nuts at all. And don't worry about the different these different group scores, but let's look at the overall score just to get the overall trend of the study. Was that people that eat walnuts, nothing else, well, in the nut category of what they ate, had a reaction times here. And remember, this is lower reaction time. This is higher reaction time, and the lower the number, the better. So, unlike, brain gauge scores, when you get your speed score, higher number is better. But raw reaction time, you want a lower score. And this score, is 225. This score is 235. This score is close to 245. And so eating walnuts versus eating walnuts and other nuts versus no nuts at all shows a kind of a significant difference. Now, how do these people's diets differ when they eat like a lot of walnuts? I mean, the people that eat a lot of walnuts, is that because, what else are the other factors? What are they not eating? Are they eating walnuts instead of processed food, or do they eat a lot less processed food? But, those are things you think about anytime you read a study. What are the other factors? What are the comorbidities? And basically what you want to think about is, what's the lifestyle of the people? Obviously, these people, if you're eating a lot of walnuts, you probably have a pretty good lifestyle, and you're probably very careful about what you eat. So maybe it's the processed food that has an impact on their reaction time. And just a little note, if you look at brain gauge reaction time studies, the control data tends to be a little bit lower than this, but that's a whole nother talk, and you can go read about reaction time accuracy for that. Let's go take one more slide and say, is there an optimal amount of processed food? And the answer is we really don't know. Maybe the optimal amount is 0. Normal dosimetry is where you find out, some amount of something, whether it's a supplement or nootropic, or in this case, or a poison, as some people would call it, processed food. Does that make you optimize, or just, maybe optimal score is way over here at 0? And, you want to think in terms of a tuning curve for everything, but this may be a skewed tuning curve where no processed food may be the optimal amount, because processed food, as I mentioned, does have herbicides, pesticides at the very front end, and those things never really disappear. And, that's really not going to optimize brain function. There's also other food additives down the road where you start processing, even emulsifiers and food coloring and starches. But, the bottom line is garbage in, garbage out. Keep that in mind. And the other thing to think about when you're thinking about processed food is that there's a lot of local small farmers out there that are really trying to deliver healthy food so that you can eat healthy without eating processed food. The rule of thumb about 20 years ago was, if your grandparents don't recognize it as food, don't eat it. So maybe the rule of thumb now is, if your great or great grandparents don't recognize it as food, don't eat it. Support your local farms, and if you live in my area, come by and I'll give you a tour of my farm. There are other related videos on the Brain Gauge channel. So just from the news, we've seen stuff about supplements and how they work or don't work, and how aging and how physical activity actually helps out. So the combination of lifestyles has a lot to do with what you want to think about. Not just, it's not just if you eat right, you're good, or if you have, exercise all the time, then your brain health is good. I think you need to pay attention to everything. It's a multifactorial, multivariate thing you got to think about with your lifestyle. Anyway, thank you for watching, and have a great day.